Welcome to Real Wisdom, where we dive into the real stories of remarkable women. Today, I'm excited to introduce Lisa J. Weiss. Lisa's journey has been shaped by incredibly profound challenges and moments that would have tested any of us. But she didn't let those moments define her. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose. She founded Eye of the Storm Coaching and Consulting, where she helps women connect with their true selves. Lisa's story is about resilience, reinvention, and finding meaning through struggle. If you've ever felt or wondered how to turn challenges into strength, this episode is for you. And hey, if you want to hear more inspiring stories like Lisa's, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Lisa, I am so happy to have you here today. I think you have such an important message to share, but it's also a very personal one. Is it okay if we cut right to it?
Absolutely. I am thrilled to be here, to be in this conversation, and who knows where we're going to take ourselves.
I think that you face some incredible challenges, and I think that some of them are things that a lot of women can relate to,
Mhm.
from infertility and an adoption that didn't work out, and even the end of a marriage. But you use them as really a spark to start something new and different. Can you tell me how those challenges really shape the work that you do today?
Oh wow, they not only shaped the work that I do today, they shaped who I am today. Each one of those came with its own challenges and struggles. The first being the in vitro process. So I had gone through the in vitro process. My husband at the time and I were trying to have kids for years, even though there was really nothing physically wrong with either one of us. They couldn't explain why I couldn't get pregnant. And so I went through the process twice. And each time, the first time was what I call the experiment because they're really not sure how your body's going to take the medication and the drugs and all of that. And so when it didn't work, it was disappointing. However, I knew, okay, that was the test run. And the second time, I think that's where my challenges and struggles really began. Of course, I was on the highest dosages of drugs that they could put on. I was a person who was always composed, right? Nobody knew what was happening behind the curtain. And with the drugs and everything, I became this emotional roller coaster of a person that I didn't identify with. I didn't know who that was. And when it didn't work, I did what I typically did, which was armor up, dust myself off, stand up, and let's keep going again. And then the second one was the adoption. So we decided, okay, this isn't going to work. We still want a family. Let's look at adoption. What are our options? And so we went through the adoption process, which I believe anybody who's having a child should have to go through the adoption process because there is no stone that they do not overturn when it comes to the adoption process. And you really get to know yourself, you get to know your partner, you get to know everything is overturned. And it was a quick process. We were like the perfect couple. I had my own business. He was working full time. We lived in a great neighborhood. We lived within our means. We were a mixed couple. We were the perfect couple. And we were selected, and that in itself is a whole process. And we had, I think, about 6 weeks to prepare for the baby to come. And in that time, it was rushed. Everything was rushed. Family was happy, friends were happy, showers were being planned, getting the house ready. And then the day the baby was born, we saw her, we named her. And the day we were to go pick her up, which was 3 days later, the adoptive mother changed her mind. And
Oh,
so
wow.
that call in the morning, I remember it was like 11:07 or something. And the call came in and I was like, hey, how's it going? I was all excited. And her words out of our agent's words of, this so rarely happens. And in that, I knew that things had
Yeah.
changed. And so, yeah, that was devastating. And it wasn't, the in vitro process for me, the struggle in that was I went through it alone. We really cocooned ourselves in that. Nobody really knew what was going on. It was devastating, but we were cocooned in it. The adoption process, everybody knew, right?
Mhm.
Family, friends, everybody knew. And when we got the call and then we had to call or let other people know that it didn't happen, it wasn't just our grief, it was a grief of a community. And that in itself was to me, was a huge burden. And so again, we kind of cocooned ourselves. We let everybody know and said, please just let us sit in it for a while. And yeah, and then it was, how do you recover from that? And we had considered, trying again. And by then I had, made changes in my life. I had decided to become a coach and I had made emotional and spiritual changes inside myself in that process in terms of relearning who I was. And when it came time for us to decide whether or not we were going to go through the process again, I said no. I knew my life was going to change a lot. And at that time, I was just coming back into myself and I wasn't willing to risk losing that again. And so that then put pressure on the marriage. And so then the third of the marriage uh, falling apart, which I keep saying, even though it looked like things were falling apart on the outside, it was actually falling into place because all of those experiences had me tap into parts of myself that I didn't even know existed, had me learn about myself in ways that I never would have learned. And even post divorce, learning about myself, my beliefs, my values, everything got overturned. And that landed me where I am today because all of those learnings, all of those experiences, I was able to bring into my practice to be able to work with others to help them through their struggle because I've been through a few things. And so
Mhm.
I'm able
Yes.
to help others reframe and engage struggle through a different lens, through a different perspective.
Do you think that the people around you noticed those changes in you?
Uh, that's a really interesting question. I think some may have and some didn't. I was really good at hiding behind a veil in terms of nobody knew what was going on behind the veil. Very, very few people knew me, like truly knew who I was. Even my ex-husband, I hid parts of myself from him as well. Going through the in vitro process and the adoption process, all those internal conversations I was having around what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a good partner, how I was letting him down, how I was letting my family down, like all those things I kept to myself because I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer in all of that. Right. And so um, I think after the divorce was when I started to show up differently in my world. And that's where people began to see me because prior to that, I was happy Lisa. And that's all people saw was happy Lisa. People didn't see the other Lisas. They didn't see the Lisa in grief. They didn't see the Lisa that was frustrated. They didn't see Lisa that was angry very rarely. And so after those experiences, I began to show up differently.
Is that why you talk so much about the importance of staying present even through very difficult emotions?
Absolutely.
Is that something that developed from those experiences?
Absolutely. I was one of those people who disassociated. Something was happening. I got it, right? And then sort of came back in when things settled. And I hadn't even realized how much I didn't live in my body most of the time. I lived in my head. I was, my background is in communications, so always coming about risk assessments and planning and whatnot. And I was constantly thinking about things. And I said, if people knew what was going on in my head, they would have locked me up. And I was a really good chameleon. I could walk into a room and I knew exactly who I needed to be within seconds in order to fit in. And so I had no idea who I was. And so these experiences and becoming aware of what was actually going on inside of me, becoming aware of my body and the sensory cues that it was giving me was a huge learning for me because I lived in my head and I had actually cut myself off from my body. In fact, I thought my body had betrayed me because of the IVF. I'm a woman, I'm designed to do one thing, and I couldn't even do that. Right. So I cut myself off from my body. And so it was a relearning of how to be inside myself, that it was safe to be in here, and then to learn what the cues were that my body was telling me to help me make choices so that I can make different choices moving forward.
Is that something that in your work that you help people do?
Oh, absolutely. That's the foundation work. For me, it begins with breath. Right? There are 4 elemental breaths. And so learning to breathe, because one of the things I realized was growing up, I held my breath a lot. And, holding my breath was a way for me not to be in here. And so as I learned to breathe and learned to bring myself in, I began to feel things. I remember the day I turned into feeling Lisa, truly turned into feeling Lisa where I felt everything. And it's part of the fundamentals of learning how are you breathing, and then becoming aware of our body sensory cues that our body is always giving us, because a lot of the people that I work with are like me, right? They live in their heads and are cut off from their body. And so they might say something like, I'm frustrated or I'm angry. And when I ask them, well, what does that feel like inside of you? They go, well, I'm angry. All right. And so many people don't recognize that their body is letting them know that they're saying they're angry because something is happening in their body. And so I help people to become aware of those sensory cues and how to notice them, and then how to interpret what it is that your body's actually trying to tell you.
Is that part of your sensory identification cycle?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
very fascinating model. Can you, just explain it a little bit more for anybody who is listening?
If we go back just a little bit, right? So when we're moving through something, an experience that is not fun, is not easy, when we're struggling with something, there are 3 states that we tend to move through. One is disembodied, where we're not even here, we're hovering above ourselves. One is cerebral, where we're in our heads, where we're making sense of it. We're always thinking about what's going on. We know when we're listening because we've already mapped the conversation inside of ourselves. And then the third state is where we're aware. We're aware that something's going on. We want to change, but we don't know what to do about it. So it's like, we're sort of sitting on the fence, looking over on the other side, going, I want to get there and I don't know how to get there. And so, it's about helping people to identify what state they're in. Are you actually in here? Are you in your head? Are you aware? Right. And it's not just one state. We can cycle through those states several times in an hour, right? Much more
Yeah,
in
right.
in a day, right? Sometimes I'm in my head, sometimes I'm not here. So it's becoming aware of that. And then the breath work invites them to pay attention and be present in the moment of what's happening, so that they can actually feel or identify, oh, there's tingling in my fingers. Oh, I'm feeling tight in my stomach. Oh, my face is feeling hot, right? And they can become curious about those sensory cues in the body. And as you become curious about them, then there's a process that I walk them through for them to ask questions to them for themselves. And it's in the asking of the questions where the information lies.
Did you go through this process or a similar one to get to that day where you said you finally felt like feeling Lisa?
Oh, yes, it was part of when I was going through my designation to become a coach. And,
Okay.
it was a pretty intense year, couple of years. And I remember I was sitting in the car with a very, very good friend of mine, and we were going on a trip somewhere. And a friend of mine had designed my logo for me, and she sent it to me. And when I opened it up, I started crying. And I was just like, what is going on? And she kind of looked at me like, are you okay? And I said, yeah. I said, but I was just, and I was overwhelmed with joy that this person got me, to be able to represent me, in this drawing that they sent me. And that's when I really went, oh my God, I truly feel like I know now that I truly feel what's going on inside of my body. And yeah, that was a great moment. And then of course, after that, there were other examples. My favorite one is hiking. I used to go hiking with a bunch of ladies, and one year they talked me into rock climbing, which I thought I would never do because why would I want to hang off of a rock?
Yeah.
And of
Well,
course,
it's not the hanging off of the rock part. It's not hanging off of the rock part that I would be concerned about.
exactly, no sane human does that. Anyway, we get there, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go last. Of course, I went up first. And I got, three-quarters of the way up, and our guide said, "Okay, Lisa, in order for me to know you want to come down, you've got to let go." And I was just like, absolutely not. Like, this doesn't make
Mhm.
any kind of sense. My head was just like, this is where you die. This is, And in that moment, I took a breath and I checked in with my body. And there was nothing firing off in my body to say that I was in danger. It was all in my head. And so I let go. And of course, all this was happening probably within like a minute of me up there. And my girlfriends are down there chatting up the guide. So nobody's paying attention to me up on the up on the rock. And I let go. And because I let go, and he had me. And that's when I went, oh my God, my head, I should not be left alone in here by myself.
Yeah.
To take that breath and check in with my body and go, I'm okay. And I let go and I was okay. And so I've had all of these experiences since then that have shown me that my body never lies and my intellect, my head, will always try to tell me a story about something.
It sounds like you spent years putting other people first because you were worried about their feelings, and you would worry that if they saw you sort of fall apart, then they would also fall apart themselves. And I think so many women get to midlife and they recognize that that's what they've been doing for the majority of their adult life. What small steps would you recommend for women to, like you've been doing, rediscovering who they are, and that sometimes it's okay to let go of the rope.
Yeah, and it really is a journey, right? I say this is a never-ending journey. Once you get on this journey of self-discovery, of becoming aware, it doesn't stop because just as you unpeel one layer of the onion, another layer presents. I always say it begins with asking a question of, am I willing to honor myself? Am I
Mm.
willing to know myself? Right? And that whatever you answer, it's okay. So whether you answer yes, no, or I don't know, all valid responses in that moment. I think what happens with us as women, we're culturally conditioned to think about other people first. And when we think about putting ourselves first, it's selfish, and culturally selfish is a bad thing for us. And so for me, I've had to reframe that word inside of myself. And so this is where the work with the words comes in. So selfish, when you're standing on one side of the line of selfish, where, it's a boomerang of, I'm going to do this because, F you, right? That's one way of looking at selfish. Another way of looking at selfish is, I am making this choice because it's deeply meaningful for me and I'm honoring myself. And in honoring myself, I'm honoring you. And when we make choices from that place, even though the person might not like the choice that we're making, they know that they're being honored somewhere inside of themselves. And so it becomes easier for us to begin the journey of going, it's okay for me to put myself first. And I think in the clients that I've worked with in the past, especially those who have children, because their children come first. And one of the questions that I ask them is, you're always willing to do more for your children. But then here's the thing, what are you teaching your children? Because if you're not willing to put yourself first, how do your children learn that they can put themselves first?
That's a very valid point.
Right? Kids don't do what we say, they do by what they watch. And so for those of us who are constantly giving, until the well is dry, we are teaching those around us that that's how we want to be treated. Right. And so it's a process of inquiry. It's questions, it's asking ourselves those deeper questions of questioning the beliefs that we've come to just believe that's just how things are because we don't question ourselves.
No, we don't. And sometimes we either mimic maybe how we were mothered, or we go so far in the other direction if it wasn't maybe necessarily what we needed or wanted when we were children. And we could do a disservice because we're going overboard.
Absolutely. And we see that all the time, right? So we grow up in a situation with our parents, we have experiences, and we make choices growing up saying that or not that, right? And so in the choices where we go, not that, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to go the opposite direction. What we don't realize is in going in the opposite direction from that choice point, it's a move away from as opposed to a moving towards something.
Mm.
And when I make a choice, when I'm moving away from something, it tends to have a boomerang effect, right? So this is why things skip generations and why children get to get along with their grandparents because they're more like their grandparents than we were because we've made the
Yes.
opposite decisions, the opposite choices.
It's funny that you said that because I've talked to so many women who had a difficult relationship with their mother, but said, I absolutely loved my grandma. Like she was the most important figure in my life, and she provided the support and love that I wasn't getting.
Absolutely. We're humans and we're about patterns and habits and we don't even realize the patterns and habits that are repeating themselves outside of our awareness because it's unconscious. And I think that's so important for people to know. Every choice you make is intelligent. And I think we don't recognize that it's intelligent until we get new information that allows us to make a different choice. And in that moment, then things can change.
And, you were talking about emotions. I feel that our emotions can keep us stuck in a place because of what we're feeling at the time. And like you just said, not getting new information. How can we get out of that stuck place? And how would you help a woman in midlife who's feeling that maybe the best years of her life are behind her right now?
Yeah, words are kind of my superpower. And so when you use the word emotions, right, when we think about emotions, they're words, right? We're angry, we're frustrated, we're enraged, we're jealous, right? These emotions that we feel, they're words. And each person experiences those emotions differently in their body. So if I were to say to you, when you're angry, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you know when you're angry? Where do you think that it originates from?
And I'm angry, usually the first thing I do is cry. And that really makes me even more angry because I'm mad at myself that I'm showing that type of emotion.
Right. So you associate crying with angry, right?
Yes.
When I'm angry, I feel it in my stomach. Like I tighten up in my stomach area. So we're talking about the same emotion, and yet we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it differently in our bodies. And so crying is a water response in the body, which is about flow, right? For me,
Mm-hmm.
the tightening in my stomach, it's a contraction. So if you think about air contracting out of the body, so that's an air response in the body, right? So two very different physiological responses to the word anger. So which means then that how you process being angry, and how I process being angry is going to be very different because it's different information for each of us. So that's why it's so important for me in working with people, for them to become aware of the sensory cues in the body as the start point, right? Because then once you become aware, what I then go is like, okay, what if we were to take the word anger out of the conversation, and you were to consider, oh, right now I've got water coming out of my eyes? Because like you said, when you start to tear up, you become even more angry because you have a story inside yourself about this is appropriate or this is not appropriate or whatever is going on. Whereas when you take the word out and it's just like, okay, there's water coming down my face right now, it takes away the story, the judgment, because it's just a physiological response that you're thinking about. You're not thinking about the word anger. You're thinking, I've got water coming out of my eyes right now.
I want the words to come out, but that's the problem. I think they get stuck in there, so I get frustrated and more angry, and that's when the tears start.
Right. So if you were to then take a breath, in that moment, if you were to take a breath to relax into the tears, to relax into what your body is telling you, then when your body settles, the words will come. Right. And so it's a process, right? So it first begins with, let's learn the breaths. Let's now pay attention to the sensory cues in the body. So when I'm involved in a conversation and something happens, we stop talking. I invite them to take one of the 4 elemental breaths, because each breath is an invitation for information. They take the
Okay.
breath, new information presents, and then we can continue the conversation. That's where the being present comes in. It's being present to take a breath.
I think most of us aren't present for 50% of our day. We're always worried about the next thing or, situation that we're going to be involved in. Many of us are already anticipating the way that we're going to feel an hour from now.
Exactly. Exactly. So one of the little exercises that I have people do is set a timer. So on our phones, on the stove, wherever, set a timer, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And when the timer goes off, take a breath and check in, and to feel, oh, okay, I'm going to take a breath. How do I feel in this moment? Do I want to be doing what I'm doing in this moment? What's going on in my body in this moment? And I usually, if it's on my phone, I move my phone away from where I am. So I actually physically have to get up and walk towards my phone to turn it off. And while I'm walking towards my phone, I'm taking breaths and I'm being present to myself. So if you do that a few times a day, it starts getting you into the habit of checking in with yourself. It's a really easy, gentle way to begin to determine, oh, look, I haven't been breathing. I've been holding my breath. Oh, look, I'm feeling tight. Oh, I'm feeling heavy. Oh, my fingers are tingling. Oh, my toes are cold. Like we begin to notice what's going on in our bodies. And that's a great first step in just through different times of the day. Set a timer and take a breath. Inhale and exhale. And as I said, there are 4 elemental breaths, and I invite my clients to play with the 4 breaths: the earth breath, the air breath, the water breath, the fire breath, and to see what comes up when they start to play with the different breaths.
That's why I think it's so important to share these messages and to encourage other women to just look outside themselves for some answers. I know that part of what you do is helping couples with IVF, but Is it changing now? And do you want to broaden your audience?
Oh, absolutely. I think, it's been a progression for me. I went through the IVF process years ago. It took me a long time to get to a place to go, "Well, okay, now's the time that I think I can stand in this, in the presence of another and stand with them." I think that for a lot of women, we feel that we need to go through things alone. For so many women, even with our closest friends or family, there are things that we don't share with them for whatever reasons, right? And it's always intelligent. And so to create a space for people to come into where there's nothing that we can't talk about. There is no judgment around whatever someone chooses for themselves, because I know that every single person is on their own journey, and whatever they choose for themselves in that breath is intelligent, and they always have the option to change their mind, right? So I think it's important. That is why I do the work that I do, because for so many years in my own life, I went through things by myself. I felt that I had to go through things by myself. There's also this pride in knowing that you can take care of things by yourself. And going back to something you said, I heard you say earlier, when you're the rock, right? When everyone comes to you, when you're the one who always has the answers, when you crack, a lot of people don't know what to do with you. And so what that does is it perpetuates the story of I need to pick myself up and dust myself off and keep going again. I think when I was going through my divorce, at one point I was talking to my older brother, and he was saying to me, "Oh, sis, you're so strong. You'll get through this and whatnot." And I remember in that moment, I took a breath and I said, "I know I'm strong. And in this moment, I don't want to be. Just let me not be that. Like, I don't want to be strong in this moment." That was huge for me in that moment to say, let me not be strong. Let me have my moment. And I think for a lot of women and for a lot of people, men and women, giving ourselves permission. I think we look outside of ourselves a lot. The work that I do is to help people to come back inside themselves, to know that they can give themselves permission to make the changes that they want to make for themselves, right? So I think that's what really motivates me to do the work that I do, to have the conversations that I have, because I think it's so important for us to know we're not alone.
There are a lot of transitions that happen at this stage of our lives, and divorce being one of them. And I think that can feel very lonely for the people that are going through it. You've mentioned a couple of different ways where you recognize the feelings that you were having and what you needed. How did you get through that? What were some steps that maybe you could share for other women who are like, I don't know what to do at this point in my life?
Yeah, those questions of I don't know what to do. First, being able to know that that's okay, that you don't know what to do. We have created a culture where it's no longer okay to be lost, right? And so the first thing I would say is it's okay for you to be lost. Let yourself feel what being lost is like, and it's uncomfortable. It's absolutely uncomfortable. Second is, who's your person, or who are your people? Typically in our life, there's at least one or two people that we are closest to that kind of know everything about us, right? And they know you're not crazy, right? Talk to that person that you trust, and go find someone, a psychologist, a coach, a mentor, someone that will support you. Because it's not about telling you what to do, because everyone has the answers. You have your own answers. You know what it is that you want to do. It's a matter of having the support to know that you can do it on your own. It's like knowing that your journey is your journey and my journey is my journey. And yet I can look at you and know that we are standing together as we journey along this path. And that's what's key. I think people go through things alone because they feel that they're going to be judged. And we're humans. Of course we're going to judge.
Yeah.
That's what we do, right? And so to find a space where you know that you can talk to someone that's not going to judge you for the choices that you've made, that you're making, that you might make. And I think when you can be in those environments, when I have my women's gatherings and we're in those environments, I said, they're not about giving advice. It's about being able to hear yourself out loud and have others bear witness to that. That's it.
Oh, yes. Yes. Sometimes the last thing you want is advice, but you do want to be heard. And you know what I really loved when you said about when you feel that crack happening and nobody knows what to do with you? If there was one statement that I would say describes this stage of our lives, it would be that there is definitely a crack in the foundation. And
Yes.
we're just really trying to figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, I can't expect those that around us are figuring it out either. But they're
Right.
also probably looking at us like Holly's having a moment.
Right. And there's so many things happening right now. And, in our stage of life, we're going through menopause, we're in perimenopause, we're in postmenopause, right? Like there's
Yes.
so much going on physiologically and emotionally and spiritually, right? And these are not things that our mothers spoke to us about, right?
No.
So there is no guide for us to go, okay, this is what I need to do. So we have to support each other. We have to have these conversations, which is why I think your podcast is so important, on the menopause topic, because until we start talking openly and having these real conversations with each other, this is how we learn. And this is how we then become the mentors to the women who are younger than us, who are coming up, right? So that they don't have to necessarily go through the exact same things that we did, but to go, here, you might want to pay attention when this starts happening. You're not going crazy.
Right.
Right.
But oh my gosh, my mom didn't talk. No. And I don't even think we were supposed to have any emotions at the time either. It was just like I feel, well, my mom, like, she just had to take care of a family. Like, that was her job. She just had to make sure that we were fed and clothed, that we went to school and we went to bed at night.
And so that shaped who you became, right? And then the choices that you made from that. And again, I think it's so important for us to know every choice we make is intelligent. And even though we might not know the intelligence in the moment, it's intelligent. And I think where we get stuck a lot of times is we don't realize that we have the right to change our mind. So it's like, again, those sensory cues in the body. I make a choice and my body tells me something. It might be a full-on yes, or there might be a little bit of a no in there. And I brush it aside as opposed to taking a breath and going, oh, there's something here. Well, maybe what if I were to change my mind and say this, and then get to discover the next sensory cue that presents in the body? And that's living very differently, right? Kids live like that. Little kids live in their bodies. They determine
Yes.
their day based on how they're feeling, right? We're taught out of that. And so it's almost a relearning of how to pay attention and make choices based on what my body says is a yes, I'm moving into it, and a no, I'm moving away from it. And as we become aware of that, some people will have opinions and think, oh, you're fickle, you can't make up your mind, and they'll have opinions about that. And that's okay, because that's about them, not about you, right? Because again, it's my journey, my life. And a funny story I'll tell you. One of my girlfriends, when she was turning 40, wanted to go to France for her birthday. And so who doesn't want to go to France, right? So I was in like Flynn, man. And then my coaching exam was going to happen during that time. So then I called her back and I said, I can't do it. I have my coaching exam. And everything in my body said, no, 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 no. This is a yes, you have to go. And then I called her back again. And I said, I don't know how this is going to look. I don't know what I'm going to do. I know I'm in. And so in a matter of like 24 hours, I was yes, I was no, I was yes, but I don't know how I'm going to do this, right? Crazy, right? That sounds crazy. And because I let myself follow the impulses that was happening in my body, and yes, no, yes, and I sat in it for what, a couple of days, all of a sudden the answer came to me. Lisa, you're going to get there 2 days after everybody else. You take your exam, you get on a plane, you go to France. That was a solution that required me stopping, paying attention, taking a breath, and let myself be in it, right? I think we're in a society where we have to have the answers now. And, this process requires a pause, so I've come up with an acronym, REST. So it's reframe, engage, shift, and transform, right? So reframe how it is that I'm thinking or acting in this moment, engage what's going on in my body, shift my perspective and how I'm seeing or acting, and then make the transformations that will happen in my life. And so it's rest.
You were able to show up for yourself and take your exam, but then also show up for your friend because you knew that that was an important moment in her life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And had I gone with my original, no, I can't do this, I would have missed out on an incredible experience.
Oh, I'm sure. So in your work, you encourage people to accept all experiences. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
So I know in how I live my life right now, I know that I am the creator of my world, right? Everything that happens in my world, I am the creator. Whether I like what's happening in my world in the moment, not, I am creating it. And there is intelligence in it. When I take a breath and I say, okay, I know that there's intelligence in me creating this, and I might not have the answers right now. Am I willing to be here right now in this breath, in this moment? What choice can I make in this breath, in this moment? Sometimes the choice is just take a breath. Sometimes the choice could be go outside. Like sometimes the choice will be literally stick my head out the door to take a breath, fresh air, to come back in again, right? And I'm stubborn. Right. I mean, anybody, if you're in my world, we're aspects of each other. There's certain things I know about you, and you probably have you might be a little stubborn, a little defiant. I'm stubborn. Right. And I could be stubborn with myself. So I don't like it when I give myself commands. So I know when I give myself a command, a part of me is be like, really? You think you're going to do that? This is the conversation that goes on inside of me. And so to take that breath and just to go, oh, okay, Lisa, you're being stubborn in this moment. Okay, that's all right. And you still want to be stubborn in this moment now? Okay, that's right. And do you still want to be stubborn in this moment now? Okay, maybe I can let that go now. Right. And just know that there's intelligence in it all. And when we don't accept what's going on, that creates resistance inside of ourselves. So we actually start fighting ourselves. And it might present outside of that I'm having an argument with someone outside of me, but really it's a manifestation of the fight that I'm having inside of me. And so I live my life in a way, and I teach my clients that everything that we experience outside of us is a reflection of what's going on inside of us. And am I willing to take a breath to settle into this experience that I'm having inside of myself so that I can make a different choice? And sometimes it's not about making a choice where you have to do something. Asking yourself if you're willing to take a breath is making a different choice.
I get it, but I'm also a little stubborn. And there's a part of me that right now is picturing a little 3-year-old girl just like with her hands on her hips saying, nope, not going to do it.
Right.
Do it. You know what I say?
Right. Exactly. So in that moment, because that little 3-year-old, when she throws a tantrum with the information that you have as an adult, right? So that's why I say words are important and how we speak to ourselves. So the command of I will, it's always in the frame of a question. Am I willing to? Am I ready to? So when that warrior aspect of yourself comes up and she's like, then it's simply are you willing? And then she can go, no, But then there's a little part of her that's like, but she's not telling me I need to. And so in the asking, am I willing? Just phrasing it inside of ourselves, am I willing? Softens it. And
I'm
so that
writing that
warrior
down.
part of us.
Am I willing?
Yeah,
I'm writing that down.
test it out. You will not have that extra cookie. Well, really, I'll show you who I'm an adult. If I want to have that cookie, I'm gonna have that extra cookie. Who you tell? This is the conversation
Well,
that
I'm
goes.
getting up food. So there you go.
And so it becomes, am I willing to not have this cookie? Is very different,
Yes.
right? So yeah, no,
Yeah,
let me know how
completely.
that goes.
We'll check back in later on. I'll tell you about that. Before we wrap up today, I'd really love to know, is there something that you're working on, something that really lights you up, a project that you'd like to talk about?
Absolutely. I will be running, the dates aren't set yet, but I will be running a webinar for those women who are going through the IVF process, who have been through their second or more IVF process, on teaching them how to use breath as a way to stay present to what's moving in their body. And I'm also working on a new introductory workshop for those around struggle and helping them discover a different way to reframe how you engage struggle. So that's in the works and that's to come. So if they want to just pay attention, they can visit my website. I'll have all my information up there, and they can register for any upcoming conversations that I'll be having.
And what is your website? Where can they find you?
They can find me at lisajweiss.com.
Lisa, it was just what I hoped it would be. And I'm so glad I've gotten to know you. And I hope that we can continue this conversation. And I just wanted to thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. I would love to continue the conversation. Maybe we can even make it a little bit more specific around menopause, right? And the struggle that women go through in menopause and what we can do
Yes,
to help women reframe that experience inside themselves. I would love that.
that would be perfect. Again, thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.